doesn't make sense. It just doesn't work. Today I want to talk about Threads That Bind. I got a review copy from NetGalley, which is something I haven't done for a while. I just haven't been able to commit to reading, so I haven't been requesting anything. The way I've described it is that it has a fascinating magic system inspired by Greek mythology. What pulled me in about this book is that there were going to be 3 sisters and they've each got the power of the fates. Io is the 3rd sister, and so she actually has the power to cut threads. And yeah, this sounded pretty good. So I requested it and I got accepted. Woo! Overall, this is a fast-paced book. It's a little bit about fate, but it's also about exploring the sisterly bond and difficult sibling relationships. And it's also a little bit about forgiving yourself and accepting all different parts of you. That there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of bad in everyone, I guess, and nobody's perfect, and accepting that in yourself and others is actually a big part of this book, which is something I really loved. There was a lot of this book which I really loved, but overall I would say I liked it. I didn't fall in love with the book as a whole, but it gave me a lot to talk about, and that's why I wanted to make a video, because I actually have a lot to say. I find if I just love a book and want to give it 5 stars, I really don't have much to say about it other than I think everyone should read this if you like what I like. And when a book's really, really bad, sometimes I feel like I'm just sort of, punching it in the dirt, and it never asked for it either. I can be very critical of books, especially if I don't like them, but it's mostly because I work in a way where I provide feedback and people take the feedback and they make their stuff better. So when I read a book and I don't like it, I have a lot to say because that's just the way I'm built. But I also don't like having to make loads of negative videos. So it's quite nice to have a book which I really did enjoy, but also just felt like it could have been better. I also think I'm much better at writing than I am at talking, so if you want my actual thoughts, then you can go to my blog or Goodreads. I usually post everything on Goodreads. The story kicks off when Io is hired by the Mob Queen. Possibly going to say more on that later. She's hired by the Mob Queen because there are a load of wraiths running around murdering people, and everyone wants to know why. And she actually has to go investigate this with somebody who she has a linked thread with that she's fated to fall in love with, which is quite nice. Except he already has a girlfriend. There are also kind of a few other stories going along in this where one of Io's sisters is missing and they don't really fully understand what happened. She just kind of left. Basically, there's a lot going on in this book. And from the opening, I kind of thought, there's a bit too much going on for this to be a standalone, except it kind of feels like a standalone. It's kind of hard to pinpoint why, but because this book, at the heart of it, is a murder mystery. It's a fantasy, but it's also a murder mystery, set in kind of like a underbelly type world. You kind of think, once we solve the murders, we've got everything packaged and this is just going to be one book, except for there's so much going on that of course this isn't more than one book. I would say I really hope it's a duology and not a trilogy, because I've just read too many terrible book 2s to want to ever read a trilogy ever again. So yeah, hoping this is a duology. So, while there's a lot going on, there's kind of a lot for everybody. Blah, blah. There's a little bit for everybody in this book. There's a little bit of romance, there's a murder mystery, you got some fantasy elements. So there's a lot going on, and because of that, it was just very easy to read to the end. They all tie together quite nicely, I thought. Like, all the different parts. I'm not talking about the ending yet. Chapter 1 was starting from the very beginning. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through chapter by chapter. I just think that chapter 1, it needs addressing. It's chaos. There's no other way to put it. It's just absolute chaos. It throws in all what the threads are. It throws in what the sisters are. It shows that Io is actually a private investigator and she's going She's going on one of her missions, and so yeah, we got the rift between the sisters, as well as trying to introduce all the sisters. We've got the threads and trying to introduce what the threads are, you know, how they look, how they operate and stuff. And then what bugs me is that right when we're just trying to get used to how all the magic works, we see something which means that the system's broken. This is how the threads work, but also this is what they're doing and this is not how they work. And I just found that really disorientated. As a reader, I want to know how stuff works, and then I want it to maybe get broken later or get used in a different way later. I don't need that to all happen in chapter 1. But on top of that, you've got a murder mystery unfolding. You got the sisters' kind of backstory leaking in. And then right at the end, boom, you got the love interest. He just appears at the end. And it kind of felt like, you know, there's a sale on and everything must go, you know. There'll be something in this book for everyone. I'm absolutely promising it. It just felt chaotic. I do feel that there is stuff going on in the writing world, as always, which means that books which are faster paced, that can, you know, show all their colours in the first chapter, they're going to pull in a literacy agent. They're then going to pull in a publisher, and they're then going to be pulling in readers. But is this good storytelling? I would say no, it's not good. But at the same time, I enjoyed it. I felt like it wasn't done very well, but I still enjoyed it. And there was enough in there that made me go, I do want to know more about these things. Right? Say hello. You're so cuddly. Okay, there you go. Right, so chapter 2. I promise you, I'm not going through chapter by chapter. But in chapter 2, there's even a line which, let me get this right, it says, now is not the time when talking about the love interest. To me, this kind of felt like the author was almost admitting that, you know I brought the love interest in along with all that other stuff, but now's not the time. Don't worry, we'll talk about him later. I mean, that might have just been how I read it, but it's certainly how I felt when I read it. And I might have even laughed out loud legitimately about that, but yeah. And trust me, I know that young adult fiction needs to be pacey or else you're not going to get that engagement, but it's still, it didn't need to be that fast. I also think it did a pretty bad job at introducing the concepts, because later on the concepts are reintroduced in a different way. One of the ways that stuck out the most to me is that so we're told that, you know, Io can cut threads, and that's sort of severing their connection to a loved one or a loved thing. But it didn't say that when Io cuts a thread, she actually loses a thread in the process. So she's actually destroying one of her own, which means that when she selects the threads that she uses to cut others with, she's actually deciding something to lose of herself. And I think this is super important to explain when it first happens, because it changes the context. She's not only, you know, cutting a thread because that's what she does. She's also cutting a thread and choosing to sacrifice one of her own in the process. I'm absolutely covered in cats today. Like I was saying, it changes the context. And it's not in a good way. It feels like it should have been explained properly the first time, but there just wasn't enough time to do that. Or at least the author felt like there wasn't enough time to do that. Or maybe the editor felt that way. So it could be better. This even made me wonder if Io was a unreliable narrator for a while, because she seemed to say things and they just weren't particularly true. She would use things and then later it would get re-explained that this isn't quite the case. It actually works slightly differently, which made me think, oh, maybe she's just an unreliable narrator. But like I read on and I just felt like that wasn't actually the explanation. That wasn't what was going on. It was just something that could have been tweaked a bit and polished up a bit, really. I'm actually going to talk about this for a little bit longer, because that thread cutting part was quite important. When it was getting explained with more context, it was actually in a chapter where the narrative of that chapter seemed to be saying Io has trouble letting go. She struggles with letting things go. She has so many threads of her own because she can create these threads to things so easily, and she really struggles when she has to part ways with something. And that felt like it was going to be a pretty big theme of the book at the time. Except it's talking about that to explain an instance where Io literally doesn't care about what thread she loses. Because in that scene that it was kind of referring back to, she literally just picks a thread at random, boof, that's gone. And it's only now which she's thinking, oh, what did I lose? Oh, I lost that thing. It doesn't matter now. I mean, you could argue that, it doesn't matter now because, she's lost it, so she's not going to feel that strong connection. But she also didn't care in the time. And it just doesn't really prove what the chapter was trying to say. If she really struggled with letting things go, she should have struggled when she had to pick a thread to lose. Oh, and other opinions are available everywhere. In fact, when I was posting up my review of this book, I couldn't help but notice that everybody else was giving it 5 stars. Everybody loved it. Great world building, great this. And it does have a lot of good qualities, and I think lots of people will enjoy this book. And I enjoyed it. This is about how I think it could be better, not about why this is a terrible book. I think I've made that clear. Not good with the mouth words. Rocky introductions aside, I actually thought the prose flows well. I liked the character. It kind of powers through that like normal fantasy setting to give you a bit of mystery and a bit of murder, and it's got a lot going for it. But because it's so terminology heavy, I felt like it was more focused on the terminology than the actual world building. There are a lot of world building elements that go into this, but it didn't feel like it actually added to the characters or the themes or the magic of the book. So there's 2 moons. The water levels are rising. I don't know how that connects to fates or sibling relationships. I don't know how it connects to letting go of stuff. I think there's a reference of needing to drink iceberg water. At one point there's even a comment by Io that says that, oh, it's a good thing it's not the acid rain we usually get because we'd all be in pain right now. If rain is a problem, then when it rains, they should be fearful of the rain until they know it's not acidic. But they don't. It's kind of thrown in as rain, sometimes acidic. Good thing it's not right now. And it just didn't feel fully integrated to me. It felt like an afterthought. A bit of world building that I thought worked a lot better was the class system and the politics. I think it goes into as much depth in the politics as you would need to know. I wouldn't call this a politically led book. And I thought that those things worked well. I'm not really the type of person who thinks, or who likes it when a book explains that those with magic are like the lowly dregs of society. Because I kind of feel like if you have magic and other people don't, then you're probably going to succeed over them because you've got an edge. You've got something that helps you. Why doesn't it help you? So, and we've had it explored quite a bit about why, magic might, lower you. So I kind of want to see more books where those with magic are actually doing a little bit better. That makes more sense to me. But what I liked about this book is that it was consistent, that it was kind of worked into the themes and the story, the plot, the characters. It all kind of made sense and it all followed through and worked, and was a lot better than some of the other stuff, which I just didn't really get. Maybe some of those other world building elements are going to be coming into the sequel, but I just, I like books to be able to stand alone, and I felt some of these elements don't really stand alone, or I just don't really know what they were doing there. So I think what the main issue of this book is that a lot of it's done for aesthetics, which is actually a trend that is being seen in young adult fiction. There's a lot of description of world building which kind of, it builds an image in your head and it builds kind of like a feeling, but it doesn't affect the plot, the characters. it doesn't really affect the world building in a way that's meaningful. And instead it kind of just, gives like a nice grey feeling to the book that fits in with kind of like the mob queen and like the kind of criminal gangs and the difference in the class systems. So in that sense, I guess it does sort of link because there's a linked feeling, but the meaning of it to me is absolutely lost. And I just wish that books could focus a little bit more on building up like a rich world that all links together. That's when books kind of speak to me more. I also want to lightly mention that I felt some of it felt a little bit reflective of 2023 America. I don't want to get too deep into, where the author's from, where she studied and where she spends her time and what her background might be, because that's not really for me to say or to judge. But what I did find is that where the world building didn't really link together in this book, it does sort of link to modern day America. And I just found that kind of took me out of the story a bit. Don't get me wrong, I really loved all the positive representation, and this book has it. It has the diversity, it has LGBT plus characters, it has positive representation for using different pronouns. It has all those things, and those things are great. But some of the modern politics stuff, I just don't see. It just doesn't feel like it's right to be included in a book like this. No matter if it's, positive or negative representation, it just kind of took me out of the story. Maybe my opinion about that doesn't really matter. I'm thinking more about the writing and the work and how it all links together. And maybe the author is thinking more about giving people of today's young adult young adult readers, something to give them a little bit more like hope and agreement. But I'm just purely thinking about how the book links together, and I just don't think it fits very well. I also need to, because I need to explain this. Every single time I say mob queen, I have to put it in quotes. It's because I can't take it seriously. It just stood out as a really odd name choice. She's not really a mob queen. She's a mob boss, which is gender neutral. She's a mob boss. I don't know why she's called a mob queen. There's a line in there about her liking being a queen. It just kind of feels a bit goofy to me. If she was male, it wouldn't be mob king, because that also sounds goofy. I don't know why that was chosen, and I just think there would be a better term for it. On to the relationships in the book. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to go back a step. Fate magic. So a big part of this book, and more importantly, the selling point of this book, is that we're looking at fate magic. We're exploring the themes of fate. Or at least that's what I thought from the title, the blurb, and, the fact that Io has fate magic and she has a fated lover and she cuts strings just like the fates. I thought it was going to be to do with fate, but I didn't actually feel that theme come through in the book. It felt more like a murder mystery, and it felt like it was more about sibling relationships. And those things are fine. It's just there was like an unexplored theme. And I think it got diluted because of the world building, which is listing all these other gifts. I really do think the book should have focused more on fate magic. And you know what? I would have actually preferred the book if it had just had fate magic and none of this other magic in it whatsoever. If we have to have other magic in it, I just felt like we could have limited a bit more and then stuck to the fate themes. But all in all, I think it kind of got diluted. The only thing it kind of focuses on in a fate way is sort of the romantic relationship between Io and Idai. Yeah, that's the only time I felt like fate actually came up. And I think that's a shame, because that's the selling point of this book, and then it's not used. It's literally just used as a marketing tool and a pitchy idea, and that kind of annoys me as a writer. I guess it doesn't annoy me as much as a reader, though, and that might be the point. So, on to the relationships. A big part of this book is Io's relationship with her sister, Thais. I promise you, I looked up all the names beforehand and I practiced it. I just can't. The mysteries surrounding their turmoil, their past arguments that get hinted at, it kept me reading. I wanted to know what was going on with these two. I wanted to see them reunite. I wanted to see them battle it out. I wanted to know what happened. I thought it was really good. Except I did find it was very heavily Io's opinion of what happened. And we're told basically what to think of her sister. We're told her sister's mean. I think that line is directly in the book. We're told the sister's mean, unfair, that she did this, she did that, she did this. And it comes across as that to me. He said, she said. And then that kind of just taints my whole view of their relationship, because instead of getting to like meet somebody and decide for myself, I've already been told what to think, and it's pretty clear what you're supposed to think, so you just sort of go along with it. That might be quite a difficult thing to set up in a book like this, where the character isn't around, but I feel like there was ways that it could have done it a little bit better. Either way, the character arcs around this book were the highlight. I liked seeing how Io thought about some of her past actions and how she treated herself surrounding them, and then learned to forgive herself in a way. And that kind of character arc, I just loved it. Now on to the romance. I'm going to say that the romance is really cute, but I didn't want to be in like the same room as the romance. It kind of felt like they were flirting badly. It didn't feel like that. They were flirting badly, and the author was throwing in, lines that were sort of acknowledging how bad the flirting was. But to me, this doesn't make the flirting better. It's just acknowledging the problem. It's not really doing anything. The flirting is bad. Yes, we're all in agreement here. I found in like an odd twist, I didn't want to read more about the romance. I just didn't want to be in the same room as them. It's like when two friends first start to like each other and they're flirting in front of you, as if you don't know what's going on and it's all secret, and you're just in that room like, okay, should I just leave you two to it? It's like they're flirting and they just don't know how it's seen by a third person, which in this case is me, the reader. Great for them, they're getting on, they like each other, very cute. I didn't want to be there for it. Now on to a couple of weird things. I did get the early review copy, so I understand there's going to be errors, there's going to be clunky bits, there's going to be bits that need changing or whatever. But I felt like it was quite rough, and there were also some things to do with the prose that I wasn't sure if it really was a problem with editing or whether it was just going to be missed entirely. So I'm going to mention some things, and I might take them out of this bit, and yeah, we'll see. The one that stuck out to me the most is somebody makes a joke about how they got beaten up in a police cell, and they're sort of saying, they're trying to do a joke based off of snitches get stitches, and they're sort of saying we weren't snitches, so we got stitches. Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't work. I think what they wanted to joke about is, we weren't snitches, but we still got the stitches. But that's not what they said. They just said the saying wrong, and you're left thinking, what? What? The other thing is there's one character who gets full named every time, like their mother is telling them off, and it just stands out so badly. Everybody else gets introduced as just their first name, as you would, and this one person gets a full name, and it's really jarring, and it's also just a bit like, well, better remember this guy and forget those other two. He's the only one it happens to. So let me know if that one's in there as well. Yeah, and some of the lines I just felt contradicted others further on. Io says something's impossible. Later on, it is possible. They know a type of person who can do it. So it doesn't work. And that's something that with a little tweak of editing, just changing what they're saying slightly, that bit of just goes away entirely. So hopefully they've reworded that, they've fixed that up a bit. Otherwise, I just kind of felt like these things weren't going to be picked up, which is why I'm mentioning them. Like, there are other typos and awkward sentences, but that's fine. They'll probably be picked up. But these things, I just felt like that was kind of like something missing, or something was rushed. I don't know. The ending. So with the ending, I had good points and bad points, which is kind of everything about this book to me. I mean, I liked the reveal. I liked that some parts were neatly tied up in a bow, but I also felt like we didn't actually get to know enough about it for the mysteries to feel complete. The thing is, the prologue of this book, it, like most murder mystery things, it starts with one of the murders. And once you've read the whole book, what I like to do with these types of books is go back to that first chapter and see if it changed, what went on, how I felt about it. That you want to notice stuff that you didn't notice the first time. But it really didn't do anything. That first prologue is just for aesthetic. There's not really much more to it. And that's just another thing that I felt like this book could have been better. They could have thrown something in there. I mean, maybe I missed it, but I also I couldn't really imagine the reveal actually doing what I read in the prologue. So it just didn't really feel like it tied up very neatly. But all in all, this book could be a standalone. You could stop here and you would probably be fine to stop here. There are some things that go over to, obviously, the next book, but I do think this is a book that you could just read one book of and not feel robbed of an explanation. I would settle for a duology. I'm not reading a trilogy. So all in all, I read this book and I felt really engaged. I know my review might seem like I hated this book, but the thing is, it just got me thinking. It got my brain working. I was reading it and I was thinking, oh, I like this, but what if this? And that's the kind of energy I really like in a book. So I gave it 4 stars. I think there's a 5-star book in this, but then, I mean, I always say that. I think there's a 5-star book in every book. You just need a bit more time, work, bit of tweaking, things in and out, whatever. So that doesn't really mean much. But I really did enjoy reading this book. I read it quickly and I wanted to know what's going on, and I think I probably will read the next one. Anyway, that was my thoughts on the Threads That Bind. There's no that, it's just Threads That Bind. And yeah, thanks for listening, and you can let me know your thoughts as well if you've read it. Whew, it's been a while.